Time for seafood news.
Welcome to the Seafood News Podcast. I'm Seafood News Managing Editor Amanda Buckle, and today I'm excited to welcome Arron Kallenberg, the founder and CEO of Wild Alaskan Company, onto the podcast. Arron was born and raised in Alaska and grew up on the back deck of his family's commercial fishing boat. After working in the tech industry for nearly 2 decades, Arron launched Wild Alaskan Company in 2017. The membership-based service provides seafood lovers high-quality, wild-caught seafood from sustainably managed fisheries. Arron joins the podcast today to talk about a topic at the top of mind for almost everyone right now, inflation. And I think everyone is really starting to feel that pinch, and a recent report from the New York Times found that some people are turning towards cheaper meats and cutting subscriptions. And Payments.com, a global leader for data, news, and insights on innovation in payments and the platforms powering the connected economy, reported last month that estimated total monthly expenditure on subscriptions fell by 46% in March versus 6 months prior. Of course, this isn't just food-related subscription services, but it certainly is eye-opening. We talk about some of the issues with Arron. Let's take a listen. Hey, Arron.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us.
Happy day. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we got a lot to tie in, and it's an interesting time for everyone right now, not even in the seafood industry, just people living in this world right now with prices skyrocketing and the U.S. facing a recession risk. And we're going to talk about that, but I want to backtrack a little bit to talk about happier times, if that's even possible during the pandemic. But Wild Alaskan Company, you guys saw some success during the pandemic. And I know Lainey Welch of Alaska Fish Radio, she reported it in December 2020 that at one point you were adding up to 200 customers every day, and that's huge.
Yeah, that's interesting that that number was reported, because at the height of the pandemic, it was closer to 1,400 customers a day. I think that the 200 number was more recently, but it's untypical for Wild Alaskan to have over 200 new subscribers to the membership service daily. But at the height of the pandemic, it was definitely closer to 1,400 a day. Just a huge surge for home delivery of seafood.
Now, and I think it's interesting because obviously it was growing in popularity. You know, people, want convenience, but the pandemic really, pushed things forward and accelerated that. But I mean, it's hard for anyone to say, I saw this coming, but when the pandemic hit, was Wild Alaskan Company prepared? Did you think that you were going to get that wild boost that you got?
I think that the most important thing, I don't know who said this, but the most important thing about planning is plan for your plans to change. Mm-hmm. So as a philosophy, we obviously couldn't predict the timing of the pandemic, or, any disruption, good or negative to the business. We philosophically try to position Wild Alaskan to take advantage of volatility without necessarily needing to predict what that might be. And in the case of the pandemic, we understood that leading up to the pandemic, we understood that we needed redundancy in our fulfillment network. We have a proprietary order management system that we built that allows us to distribute our orders quite efficiently across multiple fulfillment facilities. And we understood that we needed redundancy. We didn't know that it was going to be so immediate. And in the face of a global pandemic, it's been a tragedy for so many around the world. But we philosophically had approached the business with providing for a level of redundancy for the unknown unknowns, and that ability to continue to fulfill without any major disruption throughout the pandemic has definitely been a prime example of that philosophy in action.
Yeah. And actually that kind of leads to my next question is that, a lot of businesses took some serious blows, but your company it seemed like you guys were able to grow during that pandemic. I mean, you guys expanded your team, you formed new partnerships to expand your fulfillment centers and regional delivery. Did the pandemic really accelerate those plans, or was that always, in line for Wild Alaskan Company?
Yeah, when you look back at our projections, I think every business builds those hockey stick projections that show, 5 to 10 years out. So we had, in our wildest dreams, pun intended, plan to grow to the size we are now. We just thought it would take us closer to a decade, and to have that growth accelerated into a couple of short years definitely has the management team's head spinning. So did we think we'd do it this quickly? No. We have high hopes we would do it. Yes. We were betting on some macro trends, home delivery, digital consumers, digital natives. And so, the plan fundamentals of our plan were in place, but what the pandemic really did was accentuate all of those behaviors. And I think what's most interesting about it is that those behaviors have really persisted. With seafood in particular, we're now living post-pandemic, although I'm even cautious to call it post-pandemic. It seems like we're in uncharted territory, but it's definitely not 2020 anymore. But what is persisting is the health-conscious consumer, right? Like consumers are, from our perspective, much more health-conscious. People know that wild, sustainable seafood is some of the best animal protein that you can eat on the planet. And I really do believe that consciousness, in conjunction with a newfound sort of familiarity with home delivery, has really boosted the seafood industry in particular, with direct-to-consumer businesses such as Wild Alaskan. So there's benefits of just the business model, but then really the elevated consciousness of the consumer and their focus on health. I think the pandemic has made us all feel a little more vulnerable, at best. At worst, obviously, it's been a tragedy for so many, but that new elevated consciousness, having people think about what they want to eat, and fish is becoming top of mind, despite some of the other macro trends that we're now facing. Yeah, inflation among many others.
Yeah, definitely. Now, ultimately, this past April, the company ended up raising prices, but that was the first ever price increase. So, what went into that decision?
Yeah, so we're a public benefit corporation, and we have a mandate to serve a more inclusive set of stakeholders. So it's not just the shareholders of Wild Alaskan. It's of course the shareholders, but it's also the team members, the members of the service, the communities in which we're operating, and the fish. And I often talk about the democratization of seafood. I don't think any of us want seafood to be viewed as a luxury protein that only rich people can afford to eat and afford to be healthy. So we've really held tension with the fact that we do have to be a business. We do have to make money, but we don't want to unnecessarily raise prices, and held on to that ethos as long as possible. There's absolutely no doubt that inflation is real and it's impacting the seafood industry. Wild Alaskan has seen the cost of seafood increase nearly 24% since we launched the company. We've hung on through several years of modest increases that add up over time, and for several years, the efficiency of our proprietary supply chain technology and the expansion of our fulfillment network really allowed us to more or less keep pace with those rising costs. So we were adding efficiency as fast as prices were raising, which meant that we didn't have to raise prices on Wild Alaskan's members, and we don't take that lightly. At the beginning of the pandemic, we were asked a lot, are we going to raise prices? And I said, no, we're not. And we held out over 2 years, through this volatility. And I think that's really a testament to what software can do when you combine it with the physical infrastructure that we've been able to scale. And that, I have no doubt, is the way of the future in terms of how food will end up on people's doors, because it's so much more efficient, and the carbon footprint is reduced significantly. We're very proud of the amount of fish that we're keeping out of airplanes, for instance. But the cost increases due to a pandemic in its third year, essentially. Ongoing hyperinflationary pressures this year, and the invasion of Ukraine by Russia eventually outstripped our ability to drive down our cost of goods sold in the near term through improvements to our own supply chain by itself. And
oh, wow.
That was a tipping point for us. Okay. And I think that Russia's invasion of Ukraine really, when we started looking at some of the writing on the wall in terms of fuel costs, the uncertainty around sanctions, the volatility that many of our suppliers were facing, and some of the processors that we work with, we knew that we needed to, in much the same way that we added redundancy with our fulfillment network, we needed to finally add some redundancy with respect to price. And as a result, we raised our prices for the first time in the company's history. Luckily, we didn't have to raise them nearly as much as the cost of seafood's gone up, because the members of Wild Alaskan service were able to benefit from all of the efficiencies that we've been trying so hard to bring to the seafood industry and the distribution model of frozen food general. And so we raised about, for most members, 10 to 11%. Okay. So not nearly as much as the price increase. It's a very modest price increase. And the response has been incredible. It's actually been incredibly inspiring. Countless members have emailed me and my wife and the team, and they stated that they expected a price increase, and that they're proud to support the Wild Alaskan company, that they're seeing this across the board. Yeah. And when you think about it, in this post-pandemic, or 3 years into the pandemic, I don't want to say post-pandemic, but when you think about it, with this health consciousness, when you're faced with inflationary pressures at home, and maybe you're going to cancel, your second Netflix account, or that luxury good. But you're, when you know that this is, something that's good for your health, we're finding that seafood really isn't the first thing, even with the price increase, when people are having to make those decisions.
Yeah.
That's ticking off their list. In fact, they're affirming that this is, to us, one of the things that that they plan to keep, and that's been really heartening. Because it's always unnerving for a business operator to increase prices.
Yeah, you don't want to be coming out with pitchforks. So that actually brings me to my next question. I read a really interesting interview with the CEO of a subscription commerce platform called Sticky.io, and he said something along the lines of merchants will experience a churn of consumers if they're not thinking about the ways they can deliver more value along with convenience. So, in the lines of people keeping their subscriptions while the cost of everything's going up. And, what are your thoughts on that? Like, what do you think? I mean, you talked, I guess, a little bit about it just now, and that like people see the value of seafood, but eventually, like, are you afraid that there's going to get to a point where it's, I already cut my Netflix, I cut my HBO, what's going to be the next thing?
I'm actually not familiar with that company or the comments, but I think generally, we're already seeing, a shift in the digital subscription ecosystem, right? There's been an incredible amount of very cheap capital dumped in without a lot of discretion into many direct-to-consumer e-commerce companies, many subscription models, SaaS businesses, and a lot of those don't actually have a runway. They don't have a path to profitability. They're, sort of funded with, we've been in over a decade of sort of tech venture funded hubris, right? And some people are equating this time to, another .com bubble. And, a lot of these businesses, when capital is affordable, when interest rates are at rock bottom levels, one of the, I guess, cheapest ways to make money is to invest in rapidly growing companies. When that capital starts to become more expensive, and those companies haven't actually built solid, sustainable, embedded relationships with their customers, with their members, so they don't have a path to profitability, then they're going to see a lot of churn. And I think that just really underscores the importance of building relationships with your members. Again, Wild Alaskan Company is a public benefit corporation. We view our members as stakeholders. We're in this for the long term. So we have focused very intently on building relationships with the members. And I do think that's going to be more important. You really can't have a churn and burn mentality that's fueled by a bunch of, free capital. Luckily, Wild Alaskan Company has never been institutionally backed by investors. We don't have venture capital, we don't have growth capital. So we've had to live and breathe this slow and steady relationship building, throughout. Now, the pandemic certainly boosted, our numbers, but our approach has been to share Alaska, to share this wonderful, sustainable resource with the country, and that hasn't changed. And I think businesses that are focused on fundamentals and not caught up in this, hubris of free capital, and they have a runway and they're focused on the relationship with their customers, are going to do just fine.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about cycles. When you grow up in Alaska, you're connected to the cycles of the fish, the seasons. There's a time to pick berries and hunt mushrooms and go fishing, and we view operating Wild Alaskan in that cycle. We're dependent on those same cycles. We're at scale, right? We're looking at Bristol Bay salmon run, for instance, the largest on the history, this year, and it's been phenomenal. And you really do, when you maintain that awareness, you feel that connection to nature. In most traditions, ancient traditions around the world understood the importance of that connection and those cycles, and that there were periods of periodic fasting, and modern society doesn't really understand this in mass. Most modern humans, including those in, the growth equity and venture-backed world, we lose that we lose that link to Mother Nature, and instead we're connected to the Federal Reserve, and what that interest rate's doing. And so at Wild Alaskan, we have never thought that way. We're coming at it from, the perspective of fishermen and women, that built this company up and maintain those relationships. And we view this time, as a time to, sort of collect our thoughts, resist that temptation to grow beyond our means, practice that humility, and I would even go as far as to say that spiritual strength that you have from maintaining those relationships with nature. And what we're trying to do as a public benefit corporation is share that mentality and that ethos with a larger consumer base, so that they can be reminded that they were never actually disconnected from Mother Nature, and that this awareness actually helps. And so, maybe we don't go quite as fast, but we concentrate and be grateful for the members that we do have, and that all comes from maintaining those relationships. So you could call that sticky, right? Or you could call that just getting back to basics, getting back to the fundamentals of being in concert with nature and with your fellow human being. That's really how I look at it. I will say, though, that now is actually a phenomenal time for companies that are embracing those fundamentals to advertise digitally, because what's happening right now is that so many of those companies that were boosted by capital that's no longer available, they're not able to apply that capital in the digital ad markets. So that's reducing the competitive pressure on major social network advertising platforms, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Pinterest, et cetera. And so if you do have a sustainable business model and you're able to foster relationships through social media, and social media is a great way to have a one-on-one conversation with thousands of people, then now's a wonderful time, because a lot of the people that we're advertising that are now not, because they're scrambling because of inflation, we're seeing some of the lowest ad rates that we've seen. We had a phenomenal Q1, one of the best on record, and now in the middle of the summer, we're seeing some of the lowest rates that we've ever seen before. And if you're in a position to run your business again with true connections, I think now is still a beautiful time to be a digital advertiser with a direct to consumer base.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about your company is, like, even just going to your website, it's like I feel like I'm buying like directly from you. I mean, I am, but you do such a great job telling this story. It's just like I feel like I'm going to my local, like I'm buying right off the dock. Like I'm in New Jersey, so we have Barnegat Bay. So like I feel like I'm buying, like I'm not in Alaska, but I am buying something local. I'm supporting the true fishermen, and it's just, you guys do such a great job of telling the story, and I think that definitely is why you have such a great customer base.
And we're thank you. And we're intently focused on, as we grow as a business, so we're over 70 full-time employees now, making sure that each new person that joins, data science, software engineers, product managers, all, even if they didn't grow up on a fishing boat, foster that connection to Alaska and create shared experiences. That's actually one of our values, is create shared experiences. And so we think that that's super important, that, whoever you are, whether you're coding, doing marketing, that you're internalizing this ecosystem. And so we're actually really excited to bring nearly the entire team up to Alaska this summer, next month, and take them all fishing, let them catch a salmon, for the ones that
awesome.
Are sitting in front of computers. But but that's the kind of thing that you don't necessarily need to do if you're just trying to build a business, right? But we're trying to build a business, but do something special here. And it starts with the company. I mean, I think the reason that you feel that when you look at our social media is because we feel it, and we are living it. And as we grow, we're intently focused on the team at large, to continue to build those relationships with Mother Nature, Alaska in particular.
Yeah, I love the passion.
And eventually the entire country. As I said, none of us are really disconnected from Mother Nature. It just feels like it in our modern lives.
Yeah. Well, that's great. Arron, thank you so much for joining the Seafood News podcast, and hopefully we'll have you on again soon. That's right.
Thank you for having me. Anytime.
Thanks again to Arron for joining the Seafood News podcast, and hopefully we'll have him back on soon. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next week.